While there have been technological advancements from second generation through to fourth generation in telecom, none of the previous developments expanded the service dimensions beyond the traditional revenue stream in the sector. More so, caused a technology shift in the ways other industry verticals operate. 5G is expected to add to those service dimensions through improved network performance characteristics as well as enabling technologies such as IoT, AI, robotics, etc. To elaborate this further, we have a panel discussion on 5G and digital network technologies from trials to commercialization. I would like to invite Danish Khan, Senior Assistant Editor, The Economic Times Telecom, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Danish.
Hello and welcome to today's second panel discussion, which is on 5G and digital network technologies from trials to commercialization. As we all know that 5G trials are underway actually at an accelerated pace with not both, but all the telecom operators getting into partnership with the telecom vendors, enterprises to test use cases and pilot the technology. At the same time, Bharti Airtel and Vodafone Idea are also swiftly working to make their networks ready for 5G for a possible commercial rollout next year. So to discuss this panel and topic, we have people from Bharti Airtel. We have Randeep Sekhon, CTO Bharti Airtel, Jagbir Singh, CTO Vodafone Idea, Ludvig Landgren, Head of Radio Services for Market Area, Southeast Asia and India, Ericsson, and Ryan Perera, Country Manager of Ciena India. So I'll start the discussion with Jagbir since everyone is curious about Vodafone Idea and their network readiness and what they're up to with respect to their 5G network. So Jagbir, my first question is to you.
Okay, good morning. And Danish, looks like, like you are speaking very fast, you know everything. And, you have been part of all the press release and everything. But let me just share from the Vodafone Idea point of view. You know that 2 weeks back, we did some demos of 5G trial, both in Gandhinagar and Pune. And actually what we are ensuring is we are ensuring the interworking with the current infrastructure for both NSA and the SA architecture. We did both the architecture in both the place actually with Nokia and Ericsson as partner. And the idea of this trial was not only just to test the infrastructure which is there right from the core to the transport to the radio, but at the same time actually to create the ecosystem to develop the use cases. That was the main objective. So we brought a lot of partners to actually demonstrate the use cases, especially around I would say the enterprise customers. Of course, there were the use cases for the consumer as well, but like remote education, smart cities, or the healthcare, okay, that kind of including the drone kind of application. So we actually try to bring all those partners who are developing the applications, services, somebody developing hardware and the endpoint, CPEs. So I think it was a very good sort of the co-working and the collaboration among the partners, because I'm sure that, everyone on the panel will agree. I think 5G success will come by the collaboration, not by just only, coming from the telcos. So I think we need to ensure that we are working, developing this whole ecosystem, right from the devices to the application to the services, and actually getting the small timers companies who are actually very good on the digital applications. So because just to give you the example, it's easy to say, like when we say, for example, remote healthcare, I think this ecosystem is not only just showing the demo and trial, but for that, we need to have like a telco like us. We need to have the infrastructure which is supporting 5G. We need to have the association on the alliances with the doctors. They should understand how to use it. We should have with the hospitals tie-up. We should have the tie-up with the government if there's any like a license issue or any legal issues or anything. We need to have the collaboration with the application developer for the health industry to bring everyone together on the same platform. So I think many agencies are involved to deliver one use case. So I think that was our objective, that develop and give the message to the industry that let's come together and develop the use case around the enterprise, around the consumers to make the 5G as a success.
Sure, sure. So maybe Randeep can continue with respect to the 5G use cases. We have seen in the past Bharti Airtel announcing a lot of partnerships with not just telecom technology provider, but the enterprises, including hospitals and e-commerce players like Flipkart. So, Randeep, what sort of collaboration you're looking at with those companies? What is the end goal there? Are we looking at some futuristic use cases, or do you think that some real-time use cases are already in place and 5G can fine-tune that and make it available for larger consumer base when 5G is available commercially? If you could give some sense on that.
Danish, and I think building on what was said by Jagbir, that first of all, this technology doesn't need to be tested because it is already launched in almost close to 200 now networks around the world. So it is not about testing the technology, but it is testing the context for India. And we all know technology has two variances in terms of NSA and SA. And there also are variances in terms of frequencies. You have sub-gigahertz, you have sub-6, and you have millimeter wave. What we were trying to first do testing, then I'll come to enterprise question, but I want to build it up like this, that we were trying to test what is the capacity we will get out of it, which is we were able to show capacity, which is generally a factor of throughput, like 1.3 Gbps on a sub-6, more than 4 Gbps on a millimeter wave. I think we were able to see, okay, this is the kind of throughputs you can get, and hence this is the kind of capacity you can expect. And within a cell density, these are the number of users you can support with this given speeds you want to commit to a user. Then comes coverage, which is more important because coverage has a nuance about frequency, which I'll just talk about, but also has a nuance about the MIMO you will use. Will you use a classic MIMO? Will you use a massive MIMO? Will you use a 32 TR massive MIMO or 64 TR massive MIMO? How many antenna elements will you use? What frequency bands are available? What is the OBW these radio support? And all these things need to be made ready for India context, because between N77 and N78, there are different variations of frequencies being given to operators. So we had to test what product of our partners match with what we need in India. Then what coverage can we get in urban and suburban kind of, you can say, landscapes where users will be largely densely packed. But there was a very interesting thing which we brought in is 5G relevant for rural? So we did two trials, which was 5G in sub-6 for a rural where we know sub-6 will have a larger bandwidth and hence you can support a higher throughputs, where we were able to get around 10 kilometers with a smartphone and more than 12 kilometers with this FWA ACP. And then we said, let's try on sub-gigahertz. And there we could get 20 kilometers on smartphones. We did not do a FWA trial, which means a 20 kilometer rural coverage with 5G really opens up a lot of possibilities of the use cases we will talk about, because capacity and coverage are the building blocks and ingredients of it. So then it comes to use cases for consumers and use cases for enterprises. Consumer, we demoed a gaming, because really speaking, before 4G, there was no video streaming, there was no music streaming, there was no social media where you could share rich media on the fly. You are somewhere, you're playing your own live video for your to see. It was not possible if there was no 4G. But we don't know what all will be possible with 5G. There are some early indicators, like, for example, gaming. So we demonstrated this gaming and saying on a wireless gaming, what kind of experience a gaming customer can expect. And hence it opens up for cloud gaming immense possibilities. But we all know there's a lot of talk about 5G being relevant to enterprise, which was your first question. And absolutely taking page from what Jagbir said, that it is not single man's play. In all other places, Airtel, Vodafone Idea, Jio, they build a network and they probably build a CDN and leave it at that. After that, the experience is left to the Spotify, the Prime, the Hotstar. They will see that YouTube, how the video goes, and not much play. But moment we come to 5G, there will be a ecosystem which will be needed to work together. There will be SIs, there will be app developers, there will be sensor developers, because a lot of IoTs and the connected worlds will be enabled this, and then there will be technology providers like Airtel. How do we build this ecosystem to build relevant, contextual, India-ready solutions is our main really dream for making it relevant for Indian enterprise. So we have lots and lots of test cases where we have different set of partners, whether it is a mining application or an airport application or a seaport application or a manufacturing application or a logistics application. We have 16, 17 such trials going on. But the main point in this whole thing is, how is this application or use case having a business case, where means the investment we all going to put together, will it make a meaningful impact on the enterprises in terms of either they can be more efficient, or they can be more safe, or they can be more productive, or they can actually bring in a new use case which was not possible if this technology was not there. So I would say that this is where Airtel is said that before we actually get into commercial launch, can we build these building blocks so that when we go, we can start probably with some cases already under our belt and make it contractual. So this is what Airtel is working on.
Sure, sure. Jagbir talked about both the architecture, NSA, NSA, and some sort of radio and the preparations. So my next question is to Ludwig. Why 5G core is relevant when it comes to the architectures that telecom operators are going to use and the various use cases it is going to enable? And since you work with a lot of global telecom operators which have actually deployed 5G core, for their network architecture, if you could share some insights how that is panning out and how it can help, maybe the differentiation between existing 4G core and the 5G core, and how it is going to be relevant.
Thanks, Danish, and what an honor to be part of this distinguished panel. It's really exciting, and it's really exciting times. This is on the cusp of 5G in India, so what better time to have this this discussion? And what better time also for India to leverage all of that global success? There is really a lot of momentum on 5G, obviously, both in India and globally. There's more than 100 networks that are live on 5G, and really the exciting thing is that of course, as Ericsson, we are a very big part of it. More than half of the global 5G networks are powered by Ericsson. So we have really a very vast amount of leverage and knowledge that we can tap and provide to India. And I'd like to mention exactly what Jagbir and Randeep were mentioning here, is that really the importance of 5G in India is the applicability, because all networks and all countries are different. Use cases, it's really a big change with 5G. So use cases really is important. And to your question on 5G core, this is really the fundamental shift. I would say that the biggest change of 5G is in the core. Why is that? Because of course the radio has become much more powerful. You can do all sorts of things. But really what we're looking for, all of us, in 5G is to be able to create new things. And we call it a platform for innovation. So we're creating a platform for innovation, which is so much more powerful in the core than what the previous generations were. And why is that? If you take NSA and SA and we put them side by side, NSA is very much a continuation of the old. Okay, we delivered a lot of value by virtualizing the core, and here really India is, I would say, the world leader in the amount of virtualization that has been done. And that's a really great first step, where we decouple the application from the infrastructure, and it creates much more flexibility and automation. But has it really created a fundamental change in terms of the use cases? Has it really changed fundamentally the amount of operational expense and capex used on these networks? Well, it has maybe moved it a bit, but the real big change comes with the 5G core, the standalone architecture, for two main reasons. One is that it's completely re-architected from the ground up. It's containerized, meaning it's microservices that you can use on practically any infrastructure, whether it's private or public cloud. So you get a very big amount of usability there. And the other possibility that usability creates is a possibility for innovation, because now the software is no longer something that you upgrade once or possibly twice per year. It's something that you can continue to feed the network, just like you're doing with your mobile phone. It continues to upgrade in the background, and this is the world that we're moving to. But maybe the most exciting part is this platform for innovation, because in SA apart from being able to be run on any infrastructure, there's a lot of new functions in the standalone, which are these exciting elements that we can utilize for this platform for innovation for the different use cases. This is items like slicing. So we can now put the slices instantaneously rather than something that we really need to configure over weeks. We can do it instantaneously. We can also provide exposure. So exposure functionality where the outside users of the network can use the network as their own part and parcel of the ecosystem, where they can configure the type of latency or bandwidth that they require. So it really becomes much more autonomous. And then thirdly, we built in a lot of security and probes into the network so that you really know what's happening in the network compared to previous architectures where this needed to be sitting on the outside. So it's really a generation shift in the core. And I would say that is the most fundamental and exciting change that we've got ahead of us with 5G.
It is also very pertinent to talk about wireline network, especially the transport. And for that, we have Ryan from Ciena. So Ryan, underlying connectivity now plays a much bigger role compared to previous generation of technologies. What role do you see of transport playing in the 5G era, given that you are a key player in that segment?
Thank you for ET for having me on this panel. You're right. The underlying connectivity networks play a much bigger role compared to the previous generations. And as Ciena, we've had the luxury of working with both Randeep's Airtel team and Jagbir's V team in preparing their networks, preparing their connectivity networks for 5G. So when I look at this thing from India standpoint, getting the capacities enhanced in long distance networks, regional networks, and metro networks, comparatively a straightforward thing. India has got very good line systems, and these days with the kind of technology we have at the terminal, increasing capacities on core networks is reasonably straightforward. Already we're into the 5th generation optics. You can run in the country, you can run 400 gig, 600 gig, 800 gig line rates in regional and metro networks. It's a pretty straightforward thing. And with 6th generation optics just around the corner, about 12 months away, we'll be able to run up to 1 tera capacity. So that's fairly straightforward. However, where we need to put more focus is in the access aggregation networks or in the backhaul networks. I remember some of these experts saying India could end up becoming a backhaul constrained country as opposed to a spectrum constrained country. And so I think that's where we're putting a lot of energy into. But I want to build on 2 things that Randeep and Jagbir said. Randeep talked about coverage. I think transport play a huge role in terms of being able to provide that coverage. The base stations now can be equipped with 10Gs, multiple 25Gs, and also 100G pluggables. And those things come with pretty significant reaches with built-in amplification. I think that way we'll be able to connect these macro base stations with very, very high capacity. And those are already being deployed by both of these companies that are currently on the panel. And the second piece I thought I'll build up on is what Jagbir said. He emphasized on use cases, the importance of use cases. And most of the use cases that Jagbir talked about, like remote healthcare, content distribution and surveillance and industrial automation, they of course have some latency requirements. And we believe the macro base stations can actually house some of those, can co-locate some of that. In fact, India has about 600,000 base stations, and part of them are macros. And particularly given the operator consolidation, those macro sites have some capacity left, both space and power. I think if you have the right backhaul capacities, those things would be very nice edge compute co-location where the partnerships that Jagbir and Randeep talked about will play a nice role where these operators will be able to partner up.
Sure, sure. Ludwig mentioned about 5G core and what sort of benefits it could bring. So I would like to have views from Randeep and Jagbir both on 5G core and what sort of preparation both the telcos are doing when it comes to their core for the 5G networks, and what sort of benefits they want to reap out of it, and what sort of preparations are going on. So maybe Jagbir can go first, and maybe Randeep can follow up with his views on this.
Or either way, we will both say almost similar things. But I think, see, the core and transport is common for the 4G and 5G, and we need to ensure that both core and transports are upgraded and able to support. And as Ryan was saying, I think transport lot of work is going on to basically go from TDM to the IPM PLS and to going for the DWDM. So I think the TDM kind of things are going away from the transport backhaul, whether it's access, aggregation, and core. Now coming back to the core, I think core, like what you need is for the core, the basic requirement is the infrastructure has to be around the cloud. So all the deployment in the data center is happening on the cloud for last 2-3 years. So whatever the core equipment, whether it's like EPC, IMS, or like even DRA or SPCs, everything, all the equipments are DNFs are coming on the cloud. This cloud is actually virtualized. It's like a ready for the 4G and as well as for 5G. The 5G only thing what you need to do is you need to upgrade the cloud to the cloud native, which is actually going to be container based, and the same cloud this can be actually upgraded for the container based application requirement. So we see no issues the current cloud what is being deployed. So we are ensuring that all the cloud whatever being deployed is mostly around the open source and is actually supporting the 4G as well as going forward 5G. I think the cloud will ensure that low latency services, the services on demand, having the Mano kind of layer actually able to do the network slicing, able to do the like any configuration, any requirement, and able to adjust on real-time basis the requirement of the latency, requirements of the bandwidth, requirements of the reliability, etc., the more resources. So this is the I can say that we are there maybe 80%, 90%, 5% will be done as and when the deployment is happening. That will be around the software upgrades. And I think this is very important for us that we make the all like core and transport ready. So as and when the spectrum comes, we are ready to integrate the radio equipment with the current core and transport.
Sure.
Randeep, over to you.
Randeep, yeah. Over to you.
Yeah, so I think like Jagbir first mentioned, there is nothing different to add here because we have been building our core networks on cloud for last 2, 3, 4 years, and all applications come on open cloud, and then we load different VNFs on it. Coming back on SA versus NSA core, while I agree with what Ludwig is saying that SA core opens up many possibilities, but I would also like to call out that the markets which have both SA and NSA, you do not find any difference on latency because they have SA core or NSA core. You can look at any crowdsource reports from American markets because they have their both. The main reason is transport network, because unless you have latency, it is the edge latency we are talking about. The main latency comes in from your transport network. So what Ryan was saying is kind of dovetailed into how the networks have to be architected to get you that lower latency. And really speaking, that lower latency for you can say a B2C use case, unless it's a cloud gaming or a very sensitive AR VR kind of a thing, it is not really that important. What is more important in this whole game which comes to play is the mobile edge computing. Is where do you really bring the application to the edge? Right now, if you see, a circle would have a tier 1, tier 2 data centers, and there'll be 2 or 3 in a circle. But if you start doing this latency sensitive and slicing sensitive applications, you'll have to build edge nodes, which I would believe earlier will come for enterprise applications, where enterprises will be able to use that. There you may actually build, you can say, a network in a box kind of application, where you will use a cloud and you'll put all the network layers onto that edge cloud and run it as a private cloud for an enterprise. It could be on-prem or off-prem into our edge data center. I think that would be the play which will be more important. But once you're ready on cloud, like what Jagbir is saying, then it is only a matter of software upgrade. And there is no reason to do software upgrades now till the use cases comes. And we have tested this. These nodes are ready to take on newer use cases as and when they come. And this is also a little bit, I would say, a complex way of building core. And hence, you'll have to start building it now so that in next 2 or 3 quarters before real use cases come, you have stabilized the softwares and things like that. That is the similar journeys which people did with VoLTE. When VoLTE came, IMS was a new angle in the core of a mobile operator, and it took time to settle. Now it is like BAU. I think same will have to be done for new core, and those journeys will have to be started now, which we have started. And as and when we find application needing a new core kind of application, we'll move there. Earlier, we like to maximize the use of our underlying assets and see how we can launch services using NSA, because really speaking from a B2 use case, NSA and SA really doesn't make any difference as it is seen in those countries as I was mentioning.
Sure. Since we have discussed use cases and various architecture and what those architecture could enable, now I would like to ask the business impact of the technology. What sort of revenue opportunities could be there for telecom operators in India, and how 5G can enhance the possibilities? So Ludwig, if you could share some views on that, how you're seeing other elsewhere, and how since India obviously is a unique market, so how do you see India being at the spot and poised to gain from the technology?
It's really a great opportunity for India with 5G, and being such a huge consumer market. It's really about maximizing what can come from the networks, and that's what 5G offers. And similar to what Randeep mentioned, I'm using here, and I'm based out of Singapore. I'm using SA and NSA. I've been using NSA for a year, and now I'm using SA for the last couple of months. And from a consumer point of view, it's not a huge difference between the two. It's really the possibilities that the network creates in terms of enterprise applications. That is what it creates. So for India, I see really a two-prong approach. And what is really great is that the solution that obviously we're offering, and most in the market are offering what we call dual mode core. So it provides both the NSA and the SA capabilities both in one. So in fact, whichever G that you want to run on the core, you can do that in the same infrastructure. So that creates a great benefit in terms of reuse of existing architectures and leveraging the networks that are already built, and then add on the capabilities as they're needed. So for India and particularly, it's really about taking care of that immense continued growth and demand for bandwidth, which is what the 5G offers a great possibility for. So you get a better TCO for your deployments. That is really, I would say, the maximum immediate benefit for the India market. The second one, though, is really around enterprise and these use cases. And what we see happening, both in India, Randeep was mentioning, working with ports and airports and mines and so on. It is exactly the same trend that's happening globally. So globally, what is happening is that these enterprises are seeing a potential to leverage 5G infrastructure in a similar way to that they have maybe leveraged LAN connections or Wi-Fi connections, but with a much greater flexibility and possibility than before. I mean, imagine wiring up a mine. How complicated is that? Imagine where are the most challenges with the mine? It is, of course, with the people that you have down in the mine, and here you would like to have autonomous vehicles instead. So what we see mining operators are doing is that they're putting a wireless network into the mine, taking the people out of it, and leveraging the 5G infrastructure to provide exactly that. It provides a possibility for much better TCO in running the operations, and a much better safety system for the operations of the mine. And the same thing is happening with airports and with seaports. So seaports, in the same way, they're also using autonomous vehicles a lot. Offloading and loading the ports. They're doing that exactly here in Singapore. And it's also an area where people need to be taken out of the equation, both for safety and for efficiency reasons, and 5G networks provide exactly that. And that was not possible in 4G, because 5G, you need a very strong and consistent capacity with low latency and the possibility to also develop different use cases for different enterprises. And that is what 5G provides.
Sure. Ryan, a lot of discussion and talk or chatter is happening around the convergence between backhaul and mid-haul. So what are your views on the importance of this convergence in the Indian context? If you could maybe share some insight on that.
Based on our understanding of the environment, we think in India, given the plans that Jagbir and Randeep outlined, we think our market's going to be predominantly backhaul, perhaps some level of mid-haul down the track. Again, this is dictated by the fiber quality and the percentage of, I guess, the macros that are currently fibered. I believe in urban areas is less than 35% fibered. So in that context, we think it will be predominantly backhaul and maybe a little bit of mid-haul. And that situation is not too different in some of the more developed countries like US and Japan and so on. They're still, going with that type of arrangement. So that's where we see the market in the short to mid-term. But I want to also take this opportunity to touch on one other thing. Like, again, we are in the business of connectivity. Again, for operators, connectivity network is something that we haven't collectively been able to monetize all too well over the last several years. So one of the things that we as Ciena are trying to do is, given the importance of connectivity, we're trying to work out ways with our service providers to better monetize connectivity. Both CTOs mentioned multiple times the importance of partner ecosystem. So they're going to have multiple partners, including some of the hyperscale partners. So if we can figure out a way to better monetize network connectivity, we think it'll go a long way. So, for that, we believe, again, it's widely discussed topic, network as a service. For that, we believe from a transport standpoint, two things are going to be absolutely instrumental. One is being able to do transport slicing. Ludwig talked about it. Again, we want to be able to do our part in terms of being able to do transport slicing, so that way we can participate with a higher level end-to-end slicing. And the second key area we're putting a lot of investment in is on the operations automation. Still have ways to go in terms of being able to provision circuits and activate circuits zero touch, or at least near zero touch. Those would be our top focus areas from India standpoint.
Sure. So my next question is fairly important, and that is the key element to this 5G story, which is spectrum. So the regulator is already looking into the pricing and discovery of various bands. So Jagbir and Randeep, I would like to understand from you, how are you preparing for 5G, keeping the availability of certain bands in mind? Obviously, the price is a different element which is being looked at by the regulator, but in terms of availability and the quantum of spectrum across bands. So if you could share a perspective on what should be the main bands which should be made available first, and then thereon which are the other bands which should come in and help you offer better differentiated services across various consumer set. So Randeep, if you could start and give us a brief, and maybe Jagbir can follow.
So yes, spectrum is the most important ingredient in a 5G rollout, and it is critical. Both the tranche of spectrum available and the price at which is available, and the bands in which is available. Why I'm saying that is because we need to be very clear on the spectrum which will be allocated, and it should be interference free. We have cases where spectrum is interfered, then really your economics don't make sense, your investment gets on hold. So we really need to get interference free spectrum. We need to get contiguous spectrum. We need to be very clear, because there is another challenge in sub-6 now, right now I'm talking about, where the OBW of the radios which the vendors make has a limitation. So we really need to know the band in which you will buy the hardware, because unlike the previous bands we have operated, any radio can impact because the bands were in 50, 60, 70 megahertz. But here the band can be 400 megahertz, where the OBW of the radios off shelf today are 200, can be 300. So it needs to be very clear what band will be available and what band will be interference free. And within that band, only the operator should be able to move in case they have to move in future, or they stay in the same band and are contiguous. So interference free, contiguous, right amount of spectrum. Like right now, we think India has 245 in sub gigahertz, which is interference free. So I would imagine that is the tranche of spectrum which should be allocated, not the spectrum which will come later after it is made interference free. On a millimeter wave, again, that spectrum should be made available and knowledge of that should be upfront, because when the operator plans its network, it plans with a mix of all bands. So if you keep changing the bands, then the network design changes. So it will be very good if we are having full transparency of availability of all spectrum, so the network design can be made according to the spectrums which will be made available. Not that you have this spectrum available, 2 years down the line you have another spectrum available, then your design you'll have to change in that sense. I would also say there is opportunity of rural 5G with sub gigahertz, but it is an expensive proposition, especially from the spectrum pricing, as well as the tranche of spectrum is very low, so the capacity you'll be able to generate will be less. So somewhere it could be seen as a, you can say, a project for rural connectivity, where it could be a government private partnership to use that band on existing base stations to cover. I would say that is one angle, or because that way, why would we leave the remote areas not getting access to 5G? Millimeter wave is also very important, because we all know fiber to home is not available across all parts of India, and definitely in those cities also not all parts of the city. So hence a millimeter wave powered FWA will make the high speed wireless access available to the users, especially when we all know that this hybrid way of working, whether it is remote studying or remote working, is going to continue even if COVID was to subside, because people have found efficiencies in that. So I would say this is what we want, that the spectrum bands, contiguous bands, tranches, and the availability of the spectrum portfolio as a whole should be clear, and it all, whatever is put in auction, should be spectrum, should be interference free. It should be clear so that operator doesn't have to then subsequently mitigate those interferences.
Sure. Jagbir, while I seek your views, I also want your views on the importance of E and V bands for 5G, because backhaul is being prepared. I know that the fiber is very difficult to be deployed across the country. So on the spectrum as a in general, and E and V bands importance, I would like you to touch upon.
So first thing is, I think whatever Randeep has said, I 100% agree. So, only thing is, I will say in different English, but the theme is same. Sub gigahertz, mid band, and the millimeter. So sub gigahertz, I think, as Randeep said, we have to also see the investment. Today, like if you see in the 4G, in my language, it's not a very efficient way of deploying 4G. You are 10 megahertz somewhere, 15 megahertz somewhere, 5 megahertz somewhere, like you are investing the full capex for 5 or 10 megahertz. It makes no sense. It's very expensive for the operator like us to deploy the eNode B and the whole infrastructure and pay the rent and energy, etc. actually for the 10 megahertz. So I think, as Randeep said, it should be very clear that, what is the roadmap, because now the spectrum is also going to be given for 30 years. So we need to ensure that we can plan our capex deployment in such a way that we know the total roadmap. And the roadmap, as he said, like amplifiers, OBW, etc. Like we can plan. Okay, today I get 100, but tomorrow I'll get another 50. But this is the band going to be. Then we can plan. The hardware accordingly. So this is one part that we need to have that clarity of the spectrum. Second part is, I think, in sub gigahertz, let's be very clear, not too much spectrum available. Again, in 700 megahertz, if there's 45 megahertz only available, and tomorrow we'll fight even 3 or 4 operators, again, the story will be the same, like a 10 megahertz each, 15 megahertz each. Then it's again not an efficient way of deploying capex. So maybe government operators, some partnership, sharing spectrum, something, at least to ensure the 5G comes almost on time in the rural areas where it makes sense to use the low-end spectrum from the coverage point of view, but at the same time, everybody gets the benefit and country get the benefit. Mid-band should be enough spectrum. Otherwise, there's no benefit of 5G. Actually, at least the 100 megahertz each one of us should get. Otherwise, the difference between 4G and 5G will not be significant. Millimeter, as Randeep said, I agree 100% in the scenario of not having enough fiber. Last mile, I think, is a good way of compensating or the complementing the FTTH rollout with the millimeter wave. And in addition to that, of course, behind that, you can get Wi-Fi, you can get many other benefits. And so this is on the millimeter wave. Coming to, I think, your important point, E-band and V-band, I think let's be, even if we get mid-band spectrum, let's say 3.5 gigahertz plus minus 100, 200 megahertz, okay, then everyone doesn't have the fiber to backhaul every base station on fiber. And deploying fiber, even if the government start giving the ROW and say that, do it, it will take 3-4 years before we can actually get the fiber to every tower. So one is sharing the policy of the fiber, among all the operators, government ensuring going forward, having the policy around the fiber, which is actually very effective, efficient, and the cheaper way where all operator can share it. But as I said, this implementation itself will take time. Policy coming in might take some time. So meanwhile, I think to ensure the rollout is not delayed, E-band and V-band becomes very important for the backhaul. And we have actually done the trial in both Gandhinagar and Pune, doing the E-band backhaul, and works perfectly for 100 megahertz backhauling, and for 800 megahertz, getting in the E-band is very efficient way. And millimeter wave also, we have done 200 into 2, 200 into 3 and 4, up to 600 to 800 megahertz equivalent 10 Gbps bandwidth on E-band is very successful. So I think this is not only a short term, but I think it's a long term to have the balancing between the fiber reach and the radio, and at the same time, not to compromise on the speed of deployment.
Sure. So should it be auctioned or allocated administratively? What do you suggest? What is your recommendation on ENV bands?
Actually, to make the 5G successful, it should be at the cheapest rate or almost free, if you ask me. Otherwise, if I don't know the legality, but it should not be costing in the interest of the rollout of the 5G.
Right. Ludwig, I have one question for you on the cloud native core. Do you think that it is going to be critical for new LTE IoT services and not just 5G? Because 5G, while it is going to be there, but we already have LTE services and IoT. What do you suggest? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so your question was on legacy services, IoT and such that is already rolled out. Of course, continue to utilize and leverage the infrastructure that's there already. But really the great thing with the dual mode core is that all of these services can be folded over. So as you want to leverage the new infrastructure, you can fold over these services, and it's absolutely seamless. Really, the big thing that we're starting to see with the 5G core rollouts is not the dual mode core, the core infrastructure itself. It's actually what you put around it. So we talked about orchestration. Ryan mentioned this as well. It becomes so important because you want to do a slicing of the network. So orchestration is that capability to do exactly that. That is the capability to be able to leverage all of these use cases that will continuously come up. And what we call it service orchestration, or in fact composite orchestration, because the orchestration is no longer of simple resources as we did in the mono architecture. In fact, this is orchestration for services that are independent for different users and different use cases, and it's across vendors. It's across transport and core, as well as radio. So it's even looking at the inventory of the infrastructure that you have in the network. So we call it composite orchestration. This is becoming a capability that most of our 5G core deployments are now looking at leveraging so that they can get the max out of the network. The other aspect is analytics. So when you launch these infrastructures, you really want to make sure to understand how is the customer feedback and behavior and utilization of the network. So analytics capabilities together with orchestration capabilities are really the two, let's say, new aspects in addition to moving the existing services to the network.
Sure. My next question is on this indigenous 5G stack, the local development of 5G technologies, be it the in-house development or the development in terms of the local manufacturing ecosystem. On the disaggregation front, I would like to first take views from Ryan. Ryan, some disaggregation has been achieved so far in the wireless networks. But if telcos need to go further, do you think it's going to be commercially viable? Because I know a lot of new parties come and get involved in terms of bringing the SI capabilities. So what are your thoughts? Maybe then I can jump to Jagbir and Randeep on their views because they have a lot to share, I presume.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, various organizations like the ORAN alliances and TIP organization and so on have already driven a fair bit of openness and disaggregation. And if you cut the hype out, I think some serious value has been achieved. I guess on paper, it makes sense to perhaps do further disaggregation. But then again, if that is to be viable, then our service providers need to have SI capabilities more efficient than the vendor community. If they develop that, then of course it'll start make sense. Otherwise, perhaps it may not make too much sense. And we're seeing even in some of the North American customers who've gone down this path of realizing where the sweet spot is, and they are revectoring their plans.
Right. Randeep, I would like to get your views on Open RAN and this whole story of locally developing the technology through collaboration or through on your own. What is Airtel doing so far, and the challenges and benefits attached with it, if you could share?
I think Open RAN is the new way of building networks. We have been talking about RAN, cloud or core for a long time in this call today. And all core is built on open ecosystem. You buy a hardware from somebody, you buy a cloud from somebody, and you buy a VNF from somebody. I think that technology is bound to come in RAN as well. But you need some custom built radios, ORAN specific, so anybody can build it. And you need some custom built COTS kind of hardware for your CUDU applications. I think once you have that in place and then you have a standard software, you can actually build ORAN networks, and Airtel is committed to it. We have made public announcement about it. We already see there are benefits of ORAN technology, both on TCO in terms of the cost, because you have the handle as an operator to drive the cost down rather than totally depending on one person, one supplier to bring the cost down. You can work with R&D companies to build the cost down you can work with chip companies to bring the cost down. You can bring those chip technologies much faster into your network and get that benefit rather than waiting for the larger vendor to integrate it in their designs. So there are all these possibilities which helps you lower the TCOs and also bring in functionalities earlier. The second part of ORAN technologies are some use cases which you need. They are more flexible to build than if you were to build on a DRAN kind of architecture, which is more closed. That said, I'm not saying DRAN architecture is not relevant. It is very relevant, but ORAN is in the initial phase. Eventually, I think everything will move into a cloud RAN kind of application, where if the traditional player open it, it will become ORAN. Otherwise, there will be a ORAN player and a cloud RAN player, but everybody will be using cloud technology to run that. There is a lot of benefit in it. Coming back to answer your India question, Airtel has announced with Indian partners, TCS ecosystem of partners, of saying we will develop ORAN based ecosystem. Again, it is a ORAN based ecosystem in India with the set of partners. And I agree with Ryan that you will need a SI capabilities. I would say it another way around, that the SI capability can be got from a good strategic partner. What you will definitely need in-house is a more stronger R&D and technology team, so that they can really define what they want and what they don't want. That is the beauty of ORAN, that you can actually get some features which are specific to you. Last, I would say on ecosystem and Make in India, I think with the SOPs government has given, every supplier is looking at manufacturing in India, and I think it makes all the sense, looking at three big operators consuming so much of technology supplier by this thing. I really don't see a reason why anything should be imported from foreign manufacturing but not built in India. And now with Indian government giving such big perks, I think we encourage all our suppliers to build in India. And once we get into ORAN ecosystem, for sure that will be built in India by Indian companies. So definitely this move will help Indian enterprise ecosystem to participate in this global supply chain.
Sure, sure. Jagbir, Vodafone Idea actually did commercially deploy some sort of open RAN stuff in the 4G network. And I'm assuming that you're open to explore the opportunities. Do you have anything extra share in terms of cost implication or the capabilities that open RAN can bring to the table? Because SI is one big issue, because we have seen with BSNL and their 4G network and how SI is actually increasing the cost for the tender. Do you think that this is the key element to the whole Open RAN story, bringing the cost down and keeping SI cost in check?
I think my view is maybe little, like different than the little, not much in this case. See, let's see what we are looking for. We want to have the lower cost. We want to have more competition among the vendors by breaking the RAN into the multiple vendors ecosystem, or we want to have the better services or the flexibility. So actually, if you see on all the accounts, yes, we are very much open. I think before my joining itself, the Vodafone Idea has done trial with Mavenir. The equipment is already up and running in Bangalore for last 2 years. And we are still working. We have come out with the RFP where we are given actually RFP to the open RAN vendor also. So it's not that we are keeping anything closed mindset. No, we are very much open. And we want to for sure see that what are the benefit this brings. So personally, I'm still not convinced that, whether it's a lower cost, when you have like breaking the, radio, RU and the DU into the three parts and bringing the three vendors, managing three vendors software upgrade in the future, managing three vendors, services end to end, I think is going to be challenged. And unless you have the three vendors, you will not get the cost benefit in terms of the hardware or the software. So I think it's and in addition to the SI role. So since we haven't deployed at the very high scale, so we don't know the cost part, frankly speaking. So it is like unless it makes sense that it's cheaper and it's going to be like easier to deploy, then yes, makes sense. So we have to yet to see that. Second is, I think in order to say that, it is having everything like a 3GPP standards, answer is no today. Actually, most of the 3GPP standards are being copied in Open RAN to actually do the testing. So it doesn't have its own, sort of the standards which are even as good as 3GPP, especially when we talk for 5G, it is already behind. So it has to run faster than the 3GPP in terms of coming out with the specs. Third is how many people are deployed actually. Today is only Rakuten is a story and God knows what the cost. We don't know that. They only know about it. So I think these are the some issues around the Open RAN that it's not matured. It's not running fast. It's not a big body who's driving the specification. It is running behind the specification compared to 3GPP. It is not giving any service advantage compared to the current architecture in terms of what is going to come from the Open RAN versus what is going to come from the cloud and core. But I think if this is really going to make sense in terms of the cost, we are more than happy and we are actually exploring. So we are not keeping, close eyes. And we want, whether it's Open RAN or classical RAN, or it's in Open RAN, it's like a Open RAN or the cloud RAN. Okay. whichever RAN is, we want Indian manufacturers. We want Make in India. Whether it's coming from the traditional vendors or it's going to come from the Indian vendor, we want actually everything to be made in India. Why not? As Randeep said, we have enough volumes and scales in this country. Okay, and at the same time, I think anything to be, like customized for India, then I think we need to be careful. We need to have the product which is as per the 3GPP standards, where we can get the benefit of the ecosystem of devices, software releases, and like GA, etc. of the vendors and interworking, all that. So I think overall basis, I still have a mixed feeling about the Open RAN and Cloud RAN. But I think this is the area where we should not close our mind. We have to keep working and find out whether it makes sense, doesn't make sense. It makes sense, adopt it.
Right, right. So speaking of standards and the whole development journey, a lot of buzz is being created on the 6G front, especially by the Indian government, because a new task force has been created, wherein we want to give our suggestions and feedback into the standardization process. So Ludwig, maybe some last questions, a few lines on 6G. How do you see being one of the large technology vendors into the technology? What sort of efforts are being made, or is it too premature to even discuss 6G, not just in India but globally? Maybe then everyone else can have maybe quick views on 6G.
Let's launch 5G first. Come on, clock is ticking. No, of course we should look to the future. Of course we should look to the future, and let's also influence the future with India. And with the very large 5G deployments that we're going to see in India, I'm sure that we will have a lot of influencing of 6G as well. I'd just like to say, I fully agree with Randeep and Jagbir on the messages here just now on Make in India, produce and develop in India. This is absolutely close to the heart of our company. We are making in India since 1994. We were in fact the first telecom vendor to manufacture in India. For staff, in terms of staff, for my staff, for Ericsson staff in this region, it is the country where we have the absolute most staff. And third, it is also the area for digital services that I represent, where we have most of the R&D. It's actually out of India in this market area. So it's fundamentally a very important market to influence these future Gs. Second, in terms of RAN architectures, let's prove the TCOs for these RAN architectures. We've got a RAN architecture today that is fantastic and delivering this capability. So let's make sure that we prove O-RAN before moving to that. So maybe I'll leave it at that. I really am excited about this journey that India is taking. Of course, 6G is a critical element of it, but let's launch 5G now. We need to do that.
Sure. Maybe Ryan, you could. I'm sure you have views on Make in India and India's participation into 6G in terms of standards and other stuff.
Yeah, Dinesh. So as Ciena, we've actually been designing and developing our products in India for the last 15 years. And we have about 2,000 R&D engineers in the country. And we've just, at the beginning of the year, we've kicked off manufacturing in India, particularly for the 5G wireless backhaul application. So we're absolutely committed, not just to design and develop, but now manufacture. So we believe that'll bring agility and more customization to the country.
Randeep, views on 6G. I also want you to touch upon 5G-I as well, because that's the standard we have developed and I know the whole story. But maybe if you can touch upon both the points and the learnings which we could fetch from our 5G-I story for 6G, given that the work is starting now.
I think it's a very good connect and a very good point, Danish, because you see, when we started developing 5G-I standards, that time 5G was already commercially launched in early parts and some parts of the world already. And by the time in 5G-I standard, I would like to have a test at it. I mean, I don't see a device, I don't see a lab where I can go and see what impact it will have on device and on network ecosystem. So we should definitely give it a see and what impact it will have. But I will say I'll segue from there into 6G, that India has such a high, I would say, brain power, that they are contributing to the R&Ds of Ericsson and Ciena here and many other companies. So why should they not contribute into the IPR creation for an Indian ecosystem? But you have to get into that journey much early. And I would say getting into the journey of 6G is absolutely the right time. And where we should create an industry, which is you can say the telco partners, the academia, all the brain we have in our very high standard academic institutions, the government of India, because they are also supporting the development of IPR for technologies, and strategic partners who have committed to India journey like Ciena, Ericsson in this call, and create how we can actually really start building 6G standards. And in these 6G standards, we cooperate with 3GPP. I think this is where what happened, that 3GPP and 5GI have a kind of overlapping requirements. So a bit could be either used by 3GPP or 5GI. And so hence you are kind of forked out. And definitely if we have to participate and be the supplier for the world, we have to be on a global standard. We cannot have a fork. We should not have a fork, I would say. So in that sense, 6G is the right time. Indian industry and academia should come together, contribute in standard building, contribute in use case building, and then create IPRs for the Indian, you can say, ownership. And that is how we will prepare. I mean, if you see many countries who are owning IPRs in 5G, they started much early and they committed R&D budgets for it. And then you see large number of those IPRs are lying with certain players who are not even supplying. So this is, I think, the absolutely right time, and we are fully committed to it. On 5G, I really cannot comment because I haven't seen a device of 5G. I haven't seen a test lab of 5G, because without device, you can't have a test lab. So unless we test it, I really cannot comment. I mean, I would only would say if 5G is just a software upgrade on existing 3GPP 5G, it should be easy. But if it means a device change, this is what the device guys tell us. In that case, it will be very difficult because you would have 50 million devices of 5G 3GPP standard in India already. So we would like Indians to use the best in class devices which are being launched without having a fork. But if it is software, let us test it out. But 6G, absolutely bang on. We must get in now and get in with full commitment and commit budgets to it.
Sure. Jagbir, if you would like to conclude the session with your views on 6G and on the standard and the role of Indian academy and the industry that can be helpful and instrumental.
So again, I will say what Randeep has said actually, so that you also know. But I think first thing is, let me talk a little differently. Thanks to the government of India, thanks to the telecom minister and prime minister. Actually, this is the right way of looking. This government is a visionary government. So it looks like that why are we talking for 6G? As Randeep said, actually it's the right time, because if you work now on the specifications, then only you can create the patent. Without creating the patents, you can't have the claim that, like you own something in the 3GPP standards. And we should have very formal way of, committee from the country. So next step is just talking. Second is actually let's form a committee, which could be from the IITs, IIC, and academics, people who are coming out forward, who have the knowledge from the Department of Telecom, maybe some people from the operator side. This committee actually should be contributing towards the standards of the 6G. So work right now. So we create, actually as a country, we should have the committee, and this committee should be representing into the international 3GPP standards. So I think we have to take this talk forward to execution. Like I'm sure some vendors must be already working on the 6G. So we should start working at the right time. But as I said, that let's identify those members. Let's make a full-fledged vendor ecosystems and academics people and the Department of Telecom and the operators. And let's have this, separate committee, just, coming out something and submitting to 3GPP, getting it patents. So this is one area. Second is, I think, coming to the 5G, I think we were left behind. at last minute you are coming out that I'll create my own standards and then deploy it, but at the same time deploy fast. Any specification to the deployment is at least the cycle of 3 to 4 years minimum. So we would have thought maybe 3 years back, but nevertheless, if we do something little bit in 5GI, that will give us the learning and the platform to contribute and be more effective for the 6G standards. So I'm not discouraging it, but I think from the deployment point of view, it is maybe too late. But let's keep working. If something good comes out, why not? So as like maybe we haven't seen, but if somebody is working on it, then we are more than happy to test it, pilot it, and and if required to deploy it. But this will, for sure, as you said, this is going to create a platform for us to be seen in the globe or the international bodies that we can do something and we can contribute to the 6G. That's my view.
So we have discussed 5G use cases, various network architectures, core, radio, open RAN, and now 6G. And I hope when we meet next year for this particular event, at least we have seen spectrum auction and we have something substantial, and we can then look forward to commercial services. Thank you very much, everyone. Randeep, Jagbir, Ludwig, and Ryan for this insightful panel. I got to learn a lot about the technologies. And I hope that in future we get to learn and meet more. Thank you very much. And it was a nice session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your point of view. Now we'll move on to the next session. Stay tuned.